So as you can see, I've got my A1200 here on the bench, and I'm going to do a couple of things here. I've got something weird in the audio jacks, where it takes a lot of wiggling to actually get audio out of both channels. I don't fully understand that. It may just be a cold solder joint. There's some issues with this little LED board where the power LED doesn't always want to come on, and I think I'm going to re-solder this maybe. I'm not real happy with the quality of the soldering there. It's really pretty piss poor. And I'm going to hopefully get the video adapter that I bought from Individual Computers installed here in this session. So the first thing I really want to do, I think, is release the keyboard. Piece of cardboard out of there. The little plastic latch here, somebody's abused it and has broken the retainer on the left side there, so that when you pick it up, the little clip's broke. And I've seen these on eBay, and I may just buy a replacement, although it said this was a 3D printed part, and I don't think that'd work well. I've also seen complete replacement connectors. Until I get a view of that connector from the other side of the board, I'm really not going to do anything with it. So let me set the keyboard aside, hopefully someplace where it won't fall. Go ahead and remove these cables, maybe. The floppy power cable, here's our little, doesn't like to release. I've only got one screw. No, floppy drive's just floating in there. Go ahead and pull off the cable. And the floppy drive's released, and the LED board's released. Now, if I remember correctly, in the individual computer notes, that video device snaps down over here, and there's a lot of flex underneath the board through the plastic. So I really think I want to pull the board out so at least the RF shielding is sitting down flush, and it's not, it hasn't got the rubber feet underneath with the flex in the board, etc. So let's go ahead and isolate PCB from the bottom of the case. I'm going to go ahead and pull if I can, the little IDE hard drive replacement out, and I think that should be enough. Nope, one more screw right here. I think that should be enough to release this assembly out. And of course, to get underneath the board to look at the solder connections on these audio jacks, I've got to pull the RF shield completely off, and I guess we'll go ahead and do that. I am on an ESD surface. And in this case, because this is a little bit later generation electronics, I am going to throw on my little wrist strap just so my body's grounded as well, just to reduce the odds of ESD damage. So this is an Amiga screwdriver. I ordered a bunch of stuff out of Europe, and I got this. I don't know if I'll need it. I guess on the Amiga 500 case, there are hex screws, and it turns out, this may not be on camera here, but it actually works pretty well if you can get it over. At least on some of these, it works pretty well to back these screws out to release the RF shield. I don't know if it'll release them all on the Some of them it doesn't really want to go on, some it does. Come on, back all the way out. It's just too tight on a number of these. But still, that was very helpful to at least get that far. Some of these are just going to plain require a these are a little tiny pair of, I call them water pump pliers. These are just really useful for getting at nuts on like BNC connectors and things. It's an X-Lite tool. Looks like the model number is a 50CG. I've had this for, I don't know, 10 or 20 years. It's just been a very handy little tool because, as you just saw, you can reach into kind of odd places. I can't get on there enough to turn that. But like for these little guys, you know, it's much easier than like a pair of needle nose pliers getting in there. I'd like to be able to get, there we go, get that loose enough. I can get onto him and finish spinning him out. He's still not agreeing with me, although he's trying. I don't necessarily know that the Amiga 1200 is more ESD sensitive or not. It's just it's later generation electronics. I think all the power rails are only 5 volt in it, so it's probably not as I mean, all electronics are static sensitive, so it is. Maybe I'm being overcautious here. I'm debating whether to remove that RF modulator. I'm not going to use it. I don't think there's enough room where the RF modulator is to get the HDMI output in place. There is in the Amiga case. Boy, there is in the Amiga case over on this end, that little door. And with the replacement Amiga case I bought, it's actually got a pre-made panel for that position. It'll take an HDMI cable, or connector, so hopefully the majority of this is happening on camera. Okay, that's got all those screws. These can slide back over here. And that should release the board from the lower RF shield. Okay, I was going to say there better be an insulation layer in there, and there is. It's pretty thin. The other thing I thought about when leaving this in and trying to get that board over here is if there's sharp pins underneath, those poking through the insulation and shorting against the bottom of the RF shield. I really don't want that to happen. There's definitely a component load on the back side of the board, as you can see. Looks like it's mostly resistors, capacitors, maybe some tiny inductors for RFI control, I don't know. But what I specifically wanted to look at here was these two audio jacks that just gave me no ends of difficulty, and it may just be they're dirty inside. The solder joints at this point look okay. I'm going to go ahead and reflow them anyhow, just because I can while I've got the board open here. I had real trouble getting both channels working at the same time. I'm just taking the outputs into a pair of PC speakers, and I made a little adapter cable, and maybe the issue's in that cable, I don't know. But I can tell you it was rather irritating. I don't know that there's any reason for that RF modulator to be left on here. As always, stuff is in the way. One of the grounds. It's the other ground. The solder joint right here actually looks, it is fractured. Looking at it, I can see that it was fractured. That one might actually be fractured as well, which isn't unusual. This one could use a bit more solder still. It's not unusual. All the mechanical stress is through the connector, and then the only thing holding these connectors on are the solder joints. You know, the RCA jacks aren't made for a lot of insertions and removals. I guess while I'm here, I might as well hit up the composite video jack as well. Not that I'll be using it for anything, but there's no reason not to touch it up as well. Of course, this is on that large copper pour for ground, so it takes a bit of time to heat. On these DB connectors, there's actually these tabs here that come through the boards on both sides, and that's where the majority of the strain relief happens, which is why it's rarer to actually break a solder joint on the actual pins. It does happen. Board's really nice and clean underneath. I do want to clean up these edge connectors. Although they don't look bad, I do have a concern about one of the connectors here. Get this up in frame, hopefully you can see it, where there's this spot here, and I can feel it with the tool, which is almost where the trace has been broken, and I have concerns about the accelerator card not making good contact there. And so I'm going to test that while I'm here. Get the meter in continuity mode. I'm going to get on both sides of the trace here. So I do have continuity through there. I don't know what that rough spot is. I'm just trying to see if it'll rub off here. It's not like somebody got a little bit of solder on there at some point. It actually feels a lot more flush. As you can see, there are dead spots in that. Got good continuity here on the other side of it, but in whatever that is, there are dead spots. And my fear was that was raised enough that it would keep the pin from making good contact, and this contact would become intermittent or just fail and affect the reliability. I don't want to scrape hard here. I don't want to take the gold plate off. I did try to dissolve this with some alcohol and didn't get anywhere. it is actually, and I'm being very gentle here with the probe tip, just kind of wiping back and forth across it. It almost feels like a pit now, or maybe whatever had started to erode that away. You know, a bit of acid from a battery. You know, it looks a lot better. It's definitely shinier than it was. I don't think I have a hard rubber eraser here. Their instructions say use a rubber eraser to erase. Other people say don't do that. I did use some alcohol and clean these earlier. I'm looking to see if I've got something here with an eraser on it that I can at least gently try to polish those up. I usually have an eraser here in the lab. I'm just not seeing it. I just spotted a tool I was looking for a few weeks ago and couldn't find. Excuse my arm being in the way here. Now, I'm going to go ahead while we have it apart here and find the CPU expansion card, just the test fit. Which is this guy. Just because I like to test fit it on here while things are loose. So it's keyed. So you can see the white bridge there. And so it does go on this way. I had questioned, of course it can only go on that way. I had questioned what the orientation would be. So it does go on this orientation. It's a very tight fit. There it goes. It's nice and solid. I definitely locked it down on there. So happy with that. I'm assuming those are gold plated down inside of the connector. They should be. So it's gold to gold and not a tin connector to gold. Don't want to mix metals and connectors. It will react. This is going to get the Rapid Road USB on it. This header here is going to get the USB itself. But what we're really after here while the board is out. Put the board back away. Is the video. That's what I'm going to start with here. Which is this package. So it's this guy. This cable's keyed, so I'm not worried about removing it. I believe based on the pictures. What orientation does that mount? I don't know now. I really thought in the pictures it went that direction. I'm really looked at this about 20 times. I really don't remember now. Okay, so the Lisa chip is this one. Hopefully there's a picture of it installed. Boy, that's really dark. Looks like it actually goes that way. As you can see the cable coming out here over where it's going to go on the output port over here. So there's a lot of I wish that was a clearer picture. I hear you, little girl. Thank you for your purchase. Open the computer, blah, blah, blah. Marks the Lisa chip, which is here next to the crystal. The cable connector of the must face to the right. So it definitely is this orientation. I talk about feeling it do what it did there, drop on and not rock or rotate before you seat it. So I might be ready just to go ahead and press fit that down on. It basically says in the instructions, well, there's a couple of notes here. This machine, or this socket's been machined to kind of allow it to go onto the chip from the opposite side. Normally the chip would drop down into it with the face up, so the socket's really being applied upside down. These little standoffs inside of here have been milled off. They've taken some plastic off around up here as well. So it's an interesting concept. It does seem to drop down on nice and solid. Oh, there goes Rosie. So your final step is to push the socket onto the Lisa chip. You might need to push very hard, but do not use any tools for the step. It is possible to apply the required pressure with just your thumbs. So I'm going to take a look. It looks to be centered correctly. It feels very positive in the way it dropped down on there. It doesn't rock. And you heard it click down on there, and that was a nice positive latch down on. So I think that went in just fine. So that was a nice, easy install. It feels nice and solid. Like I said, this cable is keyed, so the connector can only go on this orientation. I do have to actually flex the board up slightly, so it is going to touch on the top of the RAM chips here. This board is warped. That's the other thing I've noticed. It's not flat, and when I put the screw in over here, it pulls it down flat, but the board is warped. They talk in the instructions about getting the RF shielding back on. That may make the system more stable. It does come with this ground plug here, which to me looks like it was obviously meant to go on here, and I probably should have put that on first just to get a better ground. I'm not exactly sure where that's meant to reach off to. Probably over here. I wish I'd remembered to do that first. It doesn't really say in here about adding that extra ground. Shoot. Doggone it. Well, let's see if I can do this without taking it apart. You know, this was supplied for a reason. I'm trying to get a really solid ground. That's a very heavy gauge wire. So, a little pair of needle nose here. Can I hold that nut up under there successfully? I can. Sorry, I'm doing some of this off camera. And I seem to be able to get that nut to align right about there. Of course, the screwdriver I need isn't laying here where I can physically get at it. And the nut fell out of the Of course it did. Oh, come on. Problem with doing things with needle nose. These really are just flush. Do I have anything with a bit of a grip to them? The minute that screw starts to turn, it just twists that out of there. Wow, my fingers are really unhappy this morning. Well, we'll try again. Come on, go through there. Of course, there's surface mount components. And of course, oh, this is frustrating. Frustrating. Oh, come on. This shouldn't be this difficult. Get the cable in place again. Get that in there where I can see that it's lined up. There. No, maybe not. Okay, it caught there. Nice electrical connection. I would recommend putting that on first. And my assumption is this lead's meant to run over to here. Really, it looks like to me it's meant to run over to this ground pour right here. Just I'm assuming that's a ground pour. Looks rather isolated, actually. So maybe it isn't. We will find out. Nope. It's a ground over here. So they put this back together. I will attach like so, and it goes in the back of the case, and that'll give me a nice solid ground. Connection still feels good. There's really nothing else in this box, I believe. It doesn't need a driver, except maybe to enable a higher resolution graphics mode. I don't remember for sure. We resoldered the audio connectors. We touched up the composite video. I didn't actually look at the power supply connections. There's no reason not to reflow those while I'm here. Just because I can, and the tools are hot. And it's not unusual, like I say, for these solder joints to get cracked just because there's stress plugging the power cable in and out all the time. 1, 2, 3. I swear there was 5 pins off of that. 1, 2, 3. There's one there. 4. There's some solder along here that I think is for mechanical relief. I think 5's actually the ground right here. It's on a huge copper pour. I'm not sure. Trying to heat this up is a wise idea. I don't know that I want to muck with that. That's where the face shield comes through. So there was no reason really not to approach those. Get the RF shield back into scope here. I think that's the only mod that really kind of requires the board to be removed. What are you hanging up on? Well, obviously it's catching on something. Catching on that little tab I bend in there. Wow, it is really a little stubborn little hair dropped in. I did leave the plastic sheet in there, right? Yeah, it's there. Oh. It's a little too deep. I need something to kind of wedge down in there. Threads actually poke out. I could probably find something in the mess here. Like that little guy right there. Might give me enough length. The threads poke out. Make it a little easier to catch. Let's see if we can get some of these started. Need two of those little wedges in there. Or maybe not. Nope. I still don't have enough length left poking out. So we will look for another spacer similar to the first one. That's probably too long. Yep, a little bit too long. Hardware's your friend. I'm sure a good chunk of this is off camera. This is one of my little bins of hardware. I have many. They are somewhat organized. I think that's going to end up too long. Of course, now it doesn't want to come out. something a little shorter buried in there. Well, if I was starting these with my fingers, they'd all be started by now, and we wouldn't be sitting here wasting all this time. That's better. Hold on to hardware. Always useful to have floating around. There are different lengths here. Why is... That's the short one that I pulled out of the parts. That's what I want. Actually, you know, for the few dollars I paid for the tool, actually not a bad little tool. It's actually found a really nice use right here. You know, there's a little 1/4-inch nut driver. Come back around to this one that we never got started. See if we can get him to start, which we can. Trying to keep this somewhat on camera. And of course, at this point, I will test, burn in for a bit. Definitely not going to put all of the mods in at the same time. That's just asking for trouble. But really, for me, the first thing to tackle here was a video. I'm not, you know, I've got that, we looked at it in the A500 videos, that upscaler. You know, it's inexpensive. You can get them on eBay pretty inexpensive. That somebody, you know, put into a case and called a product. And it's just, you know, it works. There's artifacts and stuff on it I don't like. I'd really hope this card would remove those artifacts. However, reading, they talk about one of the other chips here gets warm and causes, you know, pixel flicker and that kind of stuff. And to add a heat sink onto, I don't remember which chip. So I'll have to watch for that, and I may have to do that. It's going to require a little pair of pliers to finish going in. Oops. As is this guy. You want these tight enough they don't back out if you actually screw in the screws from the connectors, but not so tight it breaks the connector, or, you know, it's like everything, too tight's bad, not tight enough is bad. Oh. Didn't get him back down all the way, and I can see he's poking out quite a bit actually. I'm debating now whether this would have been better off coming over this way. Did I miss one? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So these must be both ones that I pulled out of here. I say that because this is a machine screw with a little metal clip. It's got this little metal clip, so it'll be a nice tight connection. And it will actually almost, No, it's going to end up coming over here, even though this is a screw that turns down into the plastic. Let's get the bottom of the case back. I want to release this little door while we're here. And capture it. All the screws that have been removed from everything are actually captured here. So it's all together, except for the screws we just pulled out to do this little bit of work. Set him back down in there. Should be hopefully the that's made a pretty solid little connection there. Hopefully that'll fit up underneath the keyboard. I hate that the board gets flexed right here, and it's just the board actually not being flat. And of course this guy that I have off camera comes up through the bottom of the case. And is a machine thread screw. Get it lined up. I'm looking forward to getting this into the new case that I ordered, but that's, like I said earlier video, it's going to be absolutely the last thing I do. I don't want to be bruising it up. I wonder if the keyboard's going to clear over that. We'll find out here. Just test fit it. Peek down inside. Oh yeah, plenty of clearance. So the back side of the keyboard is not stressing this, putting pressure on it. So plenty of clearance. The video cable goes in right here. And it'll be routed around to HDMI over here. For now, I'm just going to float the connector out. I am while I'm here. I'm going to take a few little steps to help protect the cable. Is going to route up through right here. Oops. Just to put a bit of a something a little bit softer, the tape, rather than just the sharp metal edge there. The edge didn't feel all that sharp, but still, why take a chance when you can just kind of do what I've done here, and then it's just make a little buffer there so the cable isn't directly down, rubbing back and forth directly on the sheet metal. Routing of this will be interesting. It's kind of got a route around the keyboard or the floppy. Avoiding these connectors. Is it going to end up there that high? Where did I set the floppy drive down? Well, Wow, that's amazing. Where is the floppy drive? There's not that many places here the floppy drive could be hiding. It's really not. There it is. Say, but it is hiding very well. It sits in here. Gotta take a look for clearance. Add some more tape up here. I may end up cutting some of that shielding out of the way. I guess I'm doing this just because I can. I don't know how mandatory it is, but it's not going to hurt to protect that video cable. Actually, now it feels like floppy's actually not dropping down in there. Like there was some pressure on the cable. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to trim that RF shielding out of the way. We'll do that at a future. I feel like it went on there right. I guess it did. Floppy cable's on correctly. The power, as weird as that feels, is on correctly. That's just going to kind of float there. Throw some tape across the back side here of this board just to insulate it. Sorry, I'm doing this off camera. I just want to insulate the back of this board. Really not going to lay down flush. I need something to cut up against. What have I got laying around here that I can do that with? I guess this piece of cardboard will work. Just to trim off the excess tape. May have witnessed what I just did. Luckily I didn't cut myself. Had the finger hanging out here and I drew it right across the finger. It just makes that a little safer sitting in there. It's not solidly mounted down. That's square and on both sets of pins. See, there is metal in there that I would hate to have short to something. which means we're going to insulate on here as well. Oh, Rosie. Better to be safe than sorry. For now, I can just float there. If I put the RF shield back in, this would sit on top of the RF shield. We're really down to this cable, which is really, man, somebody has made a mess on the backside here. They've resoldered a couple of the leads. The green LED seems to cut in and out when I rock it, and so I'm going to retouch the solder joints underneath that. So let me get the tip changed out on the soldering pencil. Aw, Rosie. To clip into both at the same time just for a bit more stability. Oh, the red wire just broke off. That may be why the power LED was so flaky. That's probably the issue right there. I've seen replacement boards for this that look like they're much better made. Of course, the red lead's in the middle. Wow, the soldering on that is just so bloody poor. I think my good glasses are downstairs for this kind of work. Hopefully this isn't completely boring. Hopefully at least some of it is happening on camera. You see if I can drop out of there. The little bit of lead in the hole, or the solder and the little bit of lead that was the ground, or the red lead. And I got some of the solder. Yeah, that was enough to pull the wire out. Not sure if the red lead's power or not. Tin that up a bit. Hopefully be able to get it through the hole. See the black one's trying to break off as well. That didn't actually tin up. It didn't take any solder at all. Looked like it did. But it didn't. Now the question is with the solder on it, can I get it through that little hole? And I can't, but I can hopefully cut that large wedge off the end maybe and get it through. Nope. Really not a well-designed little board. That's made things even worse. Well, that's the reason it ends up soldered so poorly, is you can't really yeah, I will order one of the replacement boards for this. This is just a really poor design. A really poor design. This handling, the black wire is going to break off. There, it went through. I scraped a little bit of the solder off with the X-Acto and got it down to a small enough diameter. That it would attach. There's just no strain relief. This notch here may have been meant for strain relief. I don't know. That's enough that hopefully it'll somewhat work. Let's light it up again. It is keyed. It does go on that direction. Not that that's critical. Get it tacked on here someplace. Just so they're there, though it's not critical to the operation. It is nice to see power and activity LEDs. I believe we're back together. Floppy cable's on right. We checked this one earlier. The board seated well. The extra ground is there. Cable's on correct. So because the lock here is broken, I've discovered it's easier to just put it on the cable, you know, way up like I have it there. Get the keyboard set into place. Feed the cable down into the connector, and then slide the lock here down over and lock the cable in rather than try to keep the locking mechanism in place on the connector. It's not awesome, but it has worked so far. I do believe we're back together. We can apply some power to this thing and hook up an HDMI monitor and see what we get, or a DVI monitor and see what we get. So that'll be in a future video. We'll talk soon.